Song for the end. How about a song for the end? There we go then. Come on, let's get some real lads together. Let's have a good old sing song, yeah. Okay, you're all right. Come on, fellas. Get around the piano. Let's have a good go. Come on, then. You ready? Come on, you lot. Come on, then.
Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Lincoln City are the team, the Dragons is their name. Stinsel is their home ground and football is their game. So come and cheer them on, you lads, support them all the way. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis
our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Boom! Back again. How are we doing? It's been a long while since I've done a morning dog walk. It's a beautiful morning. The dog is with me and actually looks like he wants to walk. So we'll do a little bit of a recording. So there's a few little bits and bobs to talk about, nothing really specific. Get involved if you wish on the comments. If I say anything that you don't agree with or you do agree with, etc., etc., we'll go for a little bit of interaction. It's a chilly day up here, and don't let the sun's shining for you. I've got my little Adidas fingerless gloves on so I can operate my phone. It's a chilly morning, nice and sunny though. And I think that's almost like a metaphor, isn't it, for the imp season at the moment, that you know, to some it's bright, sunny, fresh and glorious. To others there's a cold and, you know, slight undercurrent. And I think that that's going to remain until May. You know, even coming out of, if you count the Accrington Stanley draw in the Cup, which I don't tend to, but even coming out of our 10th game unbeaten on Saturday, there was a win that moved us into the top half of the table, into 11th. There was still mumblings of discontent, and people are entitled to their opinion. I'm not going to come on here and start criticising and say to people, "Oh, you don't know what you've got." I'm trying to put my side, my point across. People are entitled to their opinion. I don't agree with it. I'll argue against it. If it's delivered to me, I won't argue against it randomly in the street. If I hear somebody's opinion, I don't go up to them and then argue the point with them. I just let them be. It's their opinion. And also I was picked up on having a bit of a dig about sleepwalking into relegation comments as well. And to be fair, do you know what? I was talking about relegation after the Cambridge game. You know, what was the third game of our 10-match unbeaten run at the moment. So there's an irony there. But I think really what I was pointing out was that every year after a couple of bad results around Christmas or January, you get the comments that we're sleepwalking into relegation. I don't think that's ever the case. I don't think the club blindly ever wander into relegation. I understand how that might seem. Truth is, I think that we're pretty safe. We're not in terms of points. We're at that kind of dangerous stage where you say you're pretty safe, a la 2011. But deep down, there is that slight hint that potentially, just potentially, we're not. So you need to pick up some points. Saturday was a good win. Let's not underestimate it. And morning, Malcolm. Malcolm's on board. He always normally misses it. You haven't missed much, Malcolm. 3 minutes 41, and I've just been rambling. So I think coming away from Saturday, I felt it was a good result because it was a win. Now, I'm also a performance-driven person. I will often say when we've drawn or when we've lost a game, good, Charlie. That's not what I'll say. I'll often say when we've drawn or lost a game, you know, this was right or that was right about the performance, or similarly, it was wrong. Cambridge, for instance, was a point at home, and I felt quite strongly and negatively about that. And I think it's easy to look at a football game, and I say this so many times, when you're a Lincoln City fan, you go to watch Lincoln City, you come away with an opinion on Lincoln City. Fair enough. But Lincoln City are only 50% of the equation on any given match day. The other team make up a percentage of the equation as well. And you look at MK Dons, for instance, who passed around the back and just killed off the game. And yet we come away going, well, we should have pressed them harder. We should have worked harder. When you 1-0 up and the other team just want to knock it across the back line to each other, what do you want to do? Take additional risks to make it 2-0, but where you could quite easily concede with their strikers? They killed the game. Okay, I'm not saying we were perfect in that game, but what I'm saying is there was a huge element that many Lincoln City fans don't consider, and that's the opposition. They're the faceless bad guy. They're the henchman that James Bond beats up. In people's minds, we're the superhero and they're the fodder. And you just look at where they are in the league, go, they must be shit. Forest Green, who, to be fair, weren't that great, and that was probably the worst of the 3 results that we've had recently. You look at Forest Green and go, well, we should easily be beating them. Oxford, people came away from Oxford going, we didn't kill off the game, we were poor in the second half. Let's not take anything away from Oxford United. I mean, talk about a new manager bounce in terms of performance. From what I understand from their supporters, they were streets miles and miles ahead of where they were a couple of weeks ago. Losing 3-0 to Bristol Rovers. They've got good players. Craig Short steadied the ship. They deserve the win. Let's not beat about the bush. And there's 2 saves from Carl Rushworth. Had they got the centre forward, and they can't understand why they've loaned Matty Taylor out, but had they had the centre forward, I think that probably they would have won that game. And then there would have been a little bit of a meltdown from Lincoln. We don't win enough, etc., etc. But that's by the by. We did get the win, albeit probably the least deserved result that we've got at home all season, which is utterly bizarre. But this is the same. This is a Lincoln City team that's work in progress. This is the same Lincoln City team that put 3 past Accrington. And you talk about 10 men, but it was already 1-0, 2-0 at that stage anyway. It's the same Lincoln City that comfortably really beat Bristol Rovers and should have won probably by more. It's the same Lincoln City that should have won matches numerous times over the season. So I think that there's plenty to be happy about. And for me, our season is like this glorious morning. There is a chill. There's work to be done, but positive things are coming. It's not like an autumnal morning where the sun's shining, but that all that's coming is snow and ice and frost. This, for me, is Lincoln City now. We are in the spring of Mark Kennedy's era. There's so much to be positive about. There really is. And never underestimate the value of not getting beaten. And that sounds ridiculous to a degree. Because, of course, not being beaten is the holy grail, is it not? Sometimes it doesn't feel like it. 10 unbeaten, people are criticising. And I also draw parallels between this season and 1997-98. And some of you may not be old enough to remember this. I know Shane Clark, who's on board, he will indeed remember this. We'll come back to that comment in a bit. John Beck, 97-98. Went on a 16-match unbeaten run. People were writing into the Echo to complain. They were writing into the Echo to complain because a defender was our leading scorer. The second we lost, the 16-match unbeaten didn't matter because we weren't entertaining. It was rubbish football. It was pumped up into the air. It was all this sort of stuff. All those people who were criticising, nobody seemed that bothered on the final day of the season when we beat Brighton 2-1 and we went up. Now, it's a different style of football, very much so. Mark Kennedy and John Beck's philosophies are very, very far apart. Is it to a degree like Gillingham a couple of years ago, where it's like a Steve Evans side? I don't know. I think in terms of the way that some supporters look at football that isn't free-flowing, tiki-taka, 20 shots on target every game is, well, if we're not entertaining and we're winning, some people accept that. Some won't. You could win every game, and if it wasn't entertaining, people go, well, that style of football won't keep fans coming in. People criticise Danny and Nicky's style of football, remember. Booed us off the day that we lost 3-0 to Colchester. Awful football. We were being presented with our 3rd trophy in as many seasons at the end of that game. So for some people, pure entertainment is all that football's about. And probably the exposure that we have to football now on the television, on your digital devices, it almost raises expectations, I think, because we talk about golden eras at Lincoln City. And people will talk about, oh, Murph's team. Let's go Murph's team, for instance. They were a team. Those players were great. Colin Murphy predominantly played long ball football and got it down into the final third. Certainly in the years that I saw him, I saw his football. I'm not criticising Colin Murphy, by the way, not at all. But what I'm saying is that time distorts. And so people will look at a certain time period. That was the sort of football we want to go back to, even the early 80s. Whereas, in actual fact, I've read newspaper reports from the time, long balls looking for certain players' heads, crowds dwindling, lots of negativity. And we look back at it now, or certainly fans who were there look back on it fondly. So it's easy to be really critical of what we're doing now. But actually, is this football, as some people have said, the worst football they've seen at Sincilbank? I mean, if they are, those people have got to be 10 or 11 years old, because, you know, Peter Jackson's football was as turgid as this. Chris Sutton's football was no better. Steve Tilson's football was no better. David Holdsworth's football was no better. Gary Simpson's football was no better. And we're doing all of this at a level of football where you've got players probably in this division, I'm led to believe there's one or two earning 10 grand a week at this division, and that would pay for any three of our squad. I understand you couldn't pick three of our players and collectively their wages would add up to 10 grand a week, no matter what you're told by wage websites and things like that. So it's important to keep that perspective. Unlike me, I know, but I did a little bit of research before I came on this. I didn't just stick my face on camera and start talking to you about Lincoln City, because I realised we don't lose a lot of football games. And I think that is a fundamental of football. And you can tell me what you like, scoring goals is a fundamental of football, all that sort of thing. George Graham made Arsenal great in the late 80s by not conceding goals and not losing games of football. 1-0 to the Arsenal, boring Arsenal. They won league titles. Ozzy Ardiles and Kevin Keegan are well known for having free-flowing attacking teams at Spurs and Newcastle that scored for fun but conceded for fun. And that's a castle built on sand. Eventually you'll stop scoring, but if you're conceding, it's hard to just stop conceding. Do you know what I mean? So then those managers, what did they win? Tell me. Talk to me about Ozzy Ardiles and Kevin Keegan's trophies at Newcastle. It'll be a short conversation. Talk to me about George Graham's trophies at Arsenal. It'll be a longer conversation. Talk to me about the success that John Schofield had with great football, but not really being able to defend all that well as manager in 2006-07. Great, by the way. I'm not criticising John again, but what was the level of success? Then talk to me about John Beck. Functional football is important. And I'm not saying you should always remain functional. I firmly believe that over time that does have to develop. I wouldn't be happy, and neither would you, I'm sure, if we continue to just continually, that's bad, poor grammar. But if we continue to just not bore, but just be solid and effective. But then did Burnley fans complain about that? Got to the Premier League, didn't it? Sheffield United, I think, got to the Premier League in a similar way a couple of years ago. Would we be arguing with that if it took us to promotion eventually? I don't think so. So 2020-21 season, playoffs, Blackpool in the playoffs, beat Sunderland. You know, we hammered Northampton that season. We hammered Forest Green in the FA Cup that season. We hammered Burton at home that season. We were sensational. Won 4-1 away in the Cup at Shrewsbury. We were a sensational team. League and Cup that season, Lincoln City lost 28% of their games. Look it up. Soccer Base is great. Just go Soccer Base 2020-21 season. Look down the bottom, 28% of their games. This season, we've lost 23% of our games. So at this moment in time, we've lost a lower percentage of our games than what could arguably be perceived as the best season that Lincoln City have had since God knows when. God knows when. When was the last time we were in the second tier? When did we last get this close? 1981, 82? In May 82 when we went to Fulham and we missed out marginally. So it's the best. That was the best season for 39 years. And this season we've lost fewer games than that. Okay, we've drawn games. I buy that. I'm not saying that this is as a successful season. What I'm saying is the fundamentals are in place. And we saw that against Oxford. Refuse to lose. It was a brilliant mantra of Danny Cowley's, wasn't it? And usually refuse to lose was something Danny rolled out when we'd won. So 1-0 down to Torquay, 5 minutes left, win 2-1. 1-0 down to Gateshead, 3 minutes left, win 2-1. Refuse to lose. That was refuse to lose by winning games. What we're doing here is refusing to lose. Full stop. Underlined. Refuse to lose. And that's the building block. It is the building block. And sometimes it can be hard. If you're having a new house built and, you know, for a year, all you see are the foundations going in and holes being dug and concrete being poured, it can be really hard to see the end product. It can be hard to envisage the end product. But that's how I feel we are at this moment in time. We conceded a lot of goals last season. silly goals, late goals. We gave away a lot of leads. Games we should have drawn, we lost. Now we're drawing games that some people think we should have won. It's a better place to be. Losing games that you should have drawn. So I just think that there is an air of positivity. Here's a fact for you right now. Well, it's not a fact, it's opinion, but I say it's as close to a fact as an opinion can get. We won't finish any higher than 11th. There's a gap right now between us and 10th place, which is however many points, 5, 6, 7 points, I don't know, that I think it will be incredibly difficult for us to overhaul. I actually think we'll finish lower than 11th. But this, for me, is our ceiling. Hell, just take your mind back. Everyone watching, there's 36 of you watching. Thank you very much for giving up your time on a Tuesday morning. Cast your mind back to prior to the Exeter game. First game of the season, in the fan zone, new manager, trepidation. What would you have taken? What would you have said was an acceptable finish without a ball being kicked? What would you have shook on? Call it like deal or no deal. What deal would you have struck? Would you have struck fifth from bottom rather? Some people would have gone fifth from bottom. I'll take that now. Some people would have gone middle of the bottom half. I would have taken middle of the bottom half. I would have snapped your hand off at top of the bottom half. And if you had told me bottom of the top half, I would have signed, sealed and delivered there and then. And right now we're bottom of the top half. And whilst I know that sometimes the journey isn't always pretty, we've had some wonderful moments. And again, I think that gets missed. We talk about the MK game being turgid. It was lit up by a wonder goal. In 5 years' time or 10 years' time, what will you remember about the MK game? It's easy to say now and to be facetious and say, I'll remember it was boring, but will you sit there and go, oh, I remember how tired, bored I was in that game? No, you'll do that for the Charlton game we drew 0-0, the Cambridge game we drew 0-0. But for the MK game, it'll be, that was when Danny Mandrew scored his volley. Or scored his, not his volley, scored his long-range effort. For the Forest Green game, it'll be that when Ben House scored his goal. And when we look back at certain players, sorry, let me just stop that, brother. Alarm going. When we look back at certain players and certain regimes, you tend to then forget some of the things, some of the negatives. Simon Yeo is a classic example, isn't he? We look back at Simon Yeo as this goal machine. Remember, Simon didn't score for 7 months of the 2002-03 season, and yet his name is synonymous with it because of the wonder goals that he scored. You don't remember him coming on in defeats when we lost, for instance, at Halifax. Not Halifax. Where did we lose in the FA Cup? Carlisle 2-1. Don't remember that at all. Same with the 2020-21 season, isn't it? Like Mark Kennedy made reference to Morgan Rogers and Brennan Johnson in an interview the other day. So that shows how much their influence in terms of recruitment still sits over this football club. I remember defending Brennan Johnson on social media not long after we'd lost 4-0, 4-1, 4-0 at home to Sunderland because he had missed 2 chances early doors. Not clinical enough was the feedback. And again, I'm not criticising people for making that observation at the time, but a lot of the same people that made that observation will now be looking at him doing well, saying we played a part in his development. Well, you know, sometimes you can't have it always. But I do. I'm not criticising anybody here. Please don't think that's the case. I'm not looking for arguments or fights. I'm trying to underline how football is just not as black and white as you think when you walk away from a game. And there was people walking away from the Oxford game, me included, happy with a win where we'd played relatively poorly in the second half. Oxford were a very good side. They didn't give us half as much as we had hoped, given how poorly they've been. Cameron Brannigan ran the midfield. We struggled, I think, to get into our rhythm. We struggled to stamp any authority in the middle of the park. We probably needed to go to a 3. When we went to a 3, it still showed that I think that Ethan Arahan is a great midfielder, but with him and Virtue, if we'd gone to a 3, we might have got a little bit more control in the middle of the park. No criticism of Ted, no criticism of Lass, who was excellent at right back, but we tried to change it. There wasn't this blind kind of acceptance of, well, we're not doing well in this game, we're going to keep doing the same things and see if it changes. That was last season, and I'm a hypocrite. What can I tell you? I praised Michael Appleton because he stuck to his principles. Those principles in the long term didn't work. Maybe he should have made a change. He believed football should be played the right way. The year before, we'd had evidence of the fact that sticking to your principles takes you to, within a whisker of championship football. It didn't work the following season. Shows you there's no one size fits all. apart from not conceding goals. That's one size fits all. Don't concede goals, don't lose games. You're always in with a chance of either nicking a game, nicking a win, nicking a point, and you'll stay in a division. And we've criticised performances against Charlton, against Cambridge, against Forest Green, against MK Dons. There's 4 teams that swap places with us now in a heartbeat. And I wouldn't be surprised if they would do it player for player as well as position in the league. And that's why, for me, at the minute, Lincoln City Football Club are like a chilly spring morning like this. And we're not quite in spring. Yeah, I get it. But there is so much to be positive about. And whilst my fingers are cold, whilst the football's not always entertaining, whilst there are still moans and groans, and rightfully so, you pay your money. I get that. There's still so much to be positive about. Let's pick a couple of those things as well, shall we? A couple of players. In fact, let's have a look through some comments first of all before I carry on. Morning, Kate. It's really odd how people defending Mike Clapton finish lower mid-table. But those same people are moaning about Mark Kennedy even though we're 11th. Football's about picking up points, always has been, always will be. Style is largely irrelevant. I would imagine, and I don't know how far Kate goes back, but I would imagine that Kate would have been firmly in the John Becky's God camp while we were winning games. I loved him. I hadn't seen successful football at Sincilbank since the GM Vauxhall Conference season, not really. And then John Beck came in and he changed our mentality. It's quite right. I think there is the Appleton and Kennedy thing is like yin and yang. I don't know if it's because they were Liverpool and Man United and certain people have allegiances with certain clubs. I'm not really sure. But I find that people who didn't like Mark Kennedy are more willing to didn't like Mike Clapton are more willing to give Mark Kennedy a fair whack, and people who supported Michael Appleton, some of them are a little bit quicker to have a pop at Kennedy. For me, it's never about comparison. It wasn't about comparing Danny Cowley and Michael Appleton. It's inevitable because you are always compared to your predecessor, whether you're a football manager, whether you are a right back, whether you're managing a builder's merchant. If somebody took over the Stacey West tomorrow and started doing dog walk videos, there would be inevitable comparisons between them and me, probably favourable to them. But that's how life is. So, but I get that point, Kate. Good point. Well made. Back to Shane. Indeed, that's what teams like Milton Keynes want you to do. They want you to change how you play, and that is how they'll hurt you with their quality on the ball. Exactly. So that takes us back to the whole, remember that there are 2 players or the 2 teams in every game, and never just watch one team. It's a fallacy. And I fall into it. I do. I fall into it, particularly maybe when I'm a neutral and I'm watching like England play, which isn't very often. But if I'm watching England, I tend to, why aren't England doing this? Why aren't England doing that? I become what I don't want to be when I'm a Lincoln fan. But yeah, Milton Keynes do that. They suck the life out of you. They're the vampires of League One, living in an expensive castle they can't really afford. Matthew Walker, and by the way, I don't read these comments before I put them on screen, so if there's profanities or anything like that, I apologise. I'm sure from Matthew there will not be. I think it's been a good season overall with the squad looking better, although it's not been great football and hard to watch. Hopefully with the additions of more players in the summer, hopefully a couple of wingers and a couple of attacking wing-backs, we will become easier to watch and kill games off, turning them draws into wins. Yep. But I'd rather that we remained how we are than going the other way and trying to be too aggressive and losing games that we should be drawing. Again, it's all about those fundamentals. Morning to Owen Dawson. Morning to Emma Lou Stirls. Malcolm Johnson. Murphy's team in 80-81 ground out 1-0s and 0-0s to achieve promotion. That was when we came out of Division 4 after relegation under Murphy, but effectively I think it was Willie Bell had more or less put us there in 78, 79. So 80-81 was when we came second to Southend, always cited as a proud moment in the club's history, and we ground out results. And now I see sometimes the classic games go up on the social media sites, and it's like a great goal from whose is the goal that was on? I mean, it might have been a 1976 one, but there's a wonder goal. I think it's Percy Freeman as well. But you see the goals, you go, he's a player. Look at that goal. But you don't see the other 88 minutes of that game. You can't. And if you did watch the other 88 minutes of that game, it wouldn't all be free-flowing attacking football and goals. 76 a little bit different, but 80-81, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Harry Jackson. Morning, Gary. Having watched Fans Forum highlights, I'm excited by the recent American investment. Also hoping for 3 points tonight to put us on 47 points. Yeah, I haven't really touched on the American investment a huge amount. Of course, it's great, Harry. Yeah, he's spot on, mate. And it's whether I'm not excited by it in terms of we might have £1 million to spend on a striker, because that won't happen. I just think having good business people at the helm of a football club pays dividends, and everything that we've seen from 2016 onwards, for me, started when Clive Nates came in. And that's no criticism of Bob. Bob did a fantastic job holding this club together. Chris Moyses did a fantastic job kind of trying to galvanise some of the support after we'd become very fractured and very kind of disjointed and disconnected, in my opinion, around before he came in. So there was some good work put in beforehand. But the trajectory that we're on right now started when we got genuine business acumen on the board. In terms of commercial viability, you only have to look at the numbers since Liam Scully came on board. I remember before, when we came out of the National League, I used to go to the ground, queue for 25 minutes in the centre spot or whatever the bar's called. Now, a TP suite, I never know. And then you stand outside and have a drink. And remember the first game, the fan zone, Barnet at home, we won 2-1. It was an evening game. I'm sure that was the first fan zone game. And I remember having a conversation with somebody, and Liam had gone, we need a fan zone. And he was told we can't. And he said, why can't we? We've gone, well, there's cars park along here. This is where such and such parks. Move them. That was Liam's response. Because it wasn't that there was the no can-do attitude at the club. I'm not saying that. I'm not criticising anyone who said previously. It was the new ideas that helped drive commercial revenue, that help push the playing budget up, that help bridge that gap that inevitably appears in funding between National League and League One. So when you have more people coming on board, not just the money, it's not just about the money that they're putting in, but it's about learning from them. What did they do in America that we can, apply over here, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's great. It's good to have knowledge as well as money. Owen Dawson, Jose Mourinho was successful by being very difficult to beat, 100%. Cliff Reed says absolutely, which is agreeing with one of my points. I'll take that, Cliff. 16th to 18th, Owen said, would have been where he would have settled prior to the season kicking off. Conor Pierce, hope you're well. Some fans seem too soon to judge and shout emotional responses. I'm guilty of that, by the way. I'm guilty of that. I had quite an emotional knee-jerk response to the Cambridge game, which a week later I look back on and agreed with 90% of it, but perhaps the way that it was phrased at the time was not particularly strong. Gordon Gardner, morning, Gordon. We live in a world of instant gratification. Yes, we do. Mark is learning about this league. Going forward, I believe he knows what is required to turn these draws into wins. He needs time and, as important, the right recruitment to be able to do it. He does. And it's funny, isn't it, how we talked about how crucial January transfer window was. I talked about how crucial the January transfer window was as well. And we brought in Ethan Arajon, who, for me, is one of the biggest signings that we've made in terms of needs. But we didn't bring anybody else in particularly who significantly impact the first team. Luke Plange has been in and out. Harry Boyes has been in and out. Midi Shadipo, to be fair, probably is next down from Arajon. And I quite like Midi Shadipo. I think he's a decent winger. And I think if he's someone that was available in the summer, I'd be happy for us to take him on a permanent. And I said the same about Morgan Whittaker last season, got laughed at. And look how Whittaker did. I think Shadipo is the sort of player who could develop in time to a really good player at this level for us. So I think the recruitment, I don't have a worry about the recruitment. I hold my hands up now looking back at the recruitment a summer or so ago when we brought in Hakeem Delican and Chris Maguire and Dan and Lunderloo. It wasn't a great summer in that respect. I think it was a tough one. We brought in Ted Bishop, who's done all right. We brought in Lasse Sorensen, who's done all right. It wasn't a woeful one. We brought in TJ Omer, I think, again, in long term, certainly at right centre back could be a real asset for us. But it wasn't, we didn't have the headline act. Luis Fiorini did all right as well, to be fair. David Hunt, hello David, hope you're well, pal. Any point is a good point as far as I'm concerned. No getting away from the fact often it's not, it's poor to watch. Yeah, do you know what? There isn't any getting away from that fact. I'm not lying here. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it's great to watch at times. Sometimes I don't think it's as bad to watch as people say that it is. Cambridge and Charlton at home were bad to watch. I didn't think Saturday was actually that bad to watch, to be honest. I thought Oxford were a better team. They played well, they looked like they wanted it, and we had to counter that. For me, it was an intriguing game of football. Charlton and Cambridge were like two 5-year-olds stood 10 metres apart throwing punches that they were never going to land. Nobody wants to watch that for 90 minutes. But for me, Oxford was a little bit different. And then Milton Keynes was as well. Yeah, first 20, 25 minutes, thought we did all right. Last 10 minutes, we hit the post. We created a couple of chances that we didn't take. I don't think it was as bad to watch. Words like turgid are very, very strong. Charlton and Cambridge at home were both turgid. MK Dons and Oxford were not turgid. They weren't enlightening. They weren't fireworks. They weren't fist pumps and Sweet Caroline, but they weren't, for me, turgid opinion. Sam Ray, morning. I hope Sam is on a break from school, unless it's half term. I don't know. I don't have kids. Out of the loan players, who would you have back on a permanent? Realistic, because Rushworth will not be in the Championship next year. Okay, Midi Shdipo and Matty Virtue are the only two I think that I would take. And that would be Virtue first and foremost, 100%. I think a Virtue, Arahan midfield is a strong midfield for this level. I think that Arahan is young enough to be the Cameron Brannigan that, like Cameron Brannigan is for Oxford. I think that Matty Virtue has the ability to do it relatively quickly. I think both are ready-made League One midfielders. I think both would walk into any team outside probably of Sheff Wednesday, Ipswich, and that's probably it. So I would, those two players would be massive for us. One already owned. I think Matty Virtue would be next. And it's about those building blocks. You become hard to beat, so we're hard to beat, and that's predominantly across the back. And even with players going and all that sort of stuff, you could still have across the back next season if we offered contracts to certain outfield players, Ioma, O'Connor, Sean Rowan as the three centre backs, Adam Jackson as a fourth centre back. So then, like somebody said earlier, you get your two wing backs in. Potentially loan players, potentially not, like a Cohen Bramwell, if there's one of those kicking around in League Two again that we can tempt. Remember, we're a League One side, so we can prize players away, as we did Charles Vernham and Paudie O'Connor. And then I think if you've got your two midfielders, then your heartbeat in Matty Virtue and Ethan Arahan, and you've got Ben House up top, you're then just looking for four players, aren't you? Two wingers and two fullbacks. Well, Midi Shdipo would be a winger I would keep. Danny Mandrew would be a winger who could come on. So you're almost looking for one winger to complement those, because we may still have Charles Vernon, who wouldn't surprise me if he didn't move on in the summer. So that's who I would keep. Morning to Paul Tomlinson. Good to see you on board. James Whaley, we've got a rogue cod on. Oi, 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 FA Cup winners here. Wow. A couple of points on that, James. First of all, you may well be in the quarterfinals, but you've actually still got through one fewer rounds than we did, because we had to go through the qualifiers. So you have to get to the semi-finals to match our level of achievement. We did it in the National League, you did it in League Two, so you'd have to be relegated to do it, which I'm happy for you to do. And finally, after our big day when we beat Burnley, we then went and backed it up on the Tuesday night with a 1-0 win at North Ferriby. I noticed you got beat the other night. You've got to be able to do it in two competitions, James. There's no point in being all sweetness and light in the FA Cup and then screwing it up in the league. Basically, you're the Theo Robinson of League Two. You only do it in the Cup. I think that's dealt with that. Conor Pierce, expectations, predictions once we reach safety. Will we experiment? No, I don't think so. I think we'll keep doing what we're doing, and we'll try and get a finish as high as we possibly can. I don't see that we're going to experiment with players that we potentially won't have next season. You might see a little bit more of players who could get a contract next season. You might see a little bit more, for instance, of Charles Vernham, potentially. But, we're not going to suddenly start playing Luke Plange. He might play with formations later in games. I don't know. Mark does strike me as a man who's not afraid to try things. But from the live pod, I know you were there, he suggested that three at the back is probably the way forward. And he also doesn't want square pegs in round holes. So we'll see. If anything, he's still experimenting a little bit. Anyway, I mean, playing Lasse Sorensen at right wing back on Saturday arguably was a little bit more adventurous. So, yeah, we'll see. Steve, morning, pal. I hope you're well. I can nearly see Skegness from here, where I am. I was satisfied with the way things are going. 11th in League One, unbeaten in 11 games, unbeaten at home into March. Not sure what more we can expect. We all want to be successful, but that needs to be tempered with realism. 100%. Never a truer word, written or spoken. Gordon Gardner, Shdipo needs some work out of possession, potentially, but I think Marx proved that he's got players working well out of possession. He's got a team working well out of possession. So if that does need work and does need developing, I can see that. I can see it happening. I think he's out of contract at the end of the year. He's definitely a player that I would take as part of our squad for next season. And look, this isn't a good League One. I say it so many times. People keep, Darren McAntony was in the news the other day, Peterborough chairman, saying best League One for years. No, it's not at all. Not at all. Because a Lincoln City side that are 8-9 months into their journey, that don't score enough goals and probably, let's be honest, don't always create enough chances, are 11th in the table. And had we got a 15 goal a season striker, or had we got the lone player who was going to chip in 7 goals and 6 assists, which we've had, by the way, last season with Luis Fiorini and players like that, the year before, obviously, with Johnson and Rodgers. But had we got that level of lone player, we could be knocking on the door of the playoffs. This team's not good enough for the playoffs. Or sorry, this team shouldn't be good enough for the playoffs, because we are still a little way into our journey. We are still developing. So for me, that proves that this is a relatively weak League One. I can't remember what my point was now. Anyway, let's have a look. Sam Ray, free period, catching up on his marking, evidently so, by watching this. It's your choice. Nigel, morning, Gary. Looking forward to ticking another ground off the 92 this evening. Positive, hoping for a good result. Yeah, positive for a good result. And Sam says Rushers will be championship. Yeah, he will. What a goalkeeper. What a goalkeeper. Richard Cross, this is interesting. O'Connor, player of the season. Who's your player of the season at this moment in time? I've got 2, and it's hard to pick. And one is Paudie O'Connor, and the other's Carl Rushworth. And I think when you're a team that doesn't concede goals, when you're a team that doesn't regularly get beat, when you're a team that refuses to lose, not by wins but by draws, your player of the season has almost certainly got to be a defender. Almost certainly. I think Sean Rowan has been excellent, and he wouldn't be far away from me. I think Ben House has been excellent, but he's been in and out with a couple of little injuries and his suspension. So I think Regan Pool's been excellent. I think Regan Pool has probably had a better season than he had last season, but because around him we've raised our game as well. But yeah, Paudie O'Connor. When he came in, what was it that people joked? He's a centre-half as long as he can play 46 games a season. And we were told, well, he's got red cards in him. He's not that quick. You know, there was some people being really disparaging about him before he kicked a ball. And now, even though I remember the first game of the season, and he got absolutely stripped by, was it Giovanni Brown or Sam Nombi, one of the two at Exeter, and they scored. And, oh, that new centre-half looks shit. Not many people would be saying that now. For me, I think if I had to give it right now, I'd probably give it to Paudie, but only just ahead of Carl Rushworth. Let's have a look. Kev Barwise and James Whaley are having a little bit of battering. So Conor Pierce says Rushworth player of the season in his opinion. Shane says Ben House player of the season. Richard Cross says if Conor could add 6 or 7 goals, he would be clear by far. Nigel says ditto replayers of the season. So yeah, I think what's great is there is a level of debate, because there was no debate last season. Sorry about that, sunshine, by the way. There was no debate whatsoever. It was Regan Pool. Nobody else came close. Nobody else played more than 34, started more than 33 games, I think, last season. Another big thing I think that we should mention is that, you know, it's the lack of long-term injuries to lots of key players. The same offenders, Joe Walsh, Tom Hopper, have had spells out. Ted Bishop's had a little spell out, I think. But in the main, I think that our fitness has been better. I think we've got more games out of the key players that we need to get games out of. And I think that that's shown as well in terms of consistency, certainly at the back. And one of the points I made last season was, you know, to be successful at this level, you've got to have a settled back 3, back 5 in front of your goalkeeper. You've got to have. And how many games have we started in the league this season with Rushworth and O'Connor? Has Rushworth missed 1 in the league? Potentially as O'Connor? Don't think so. Don't think Pool's missed any. You know, Rowan, Ayoma, Jackson are regulars, and when they're out, usually it's either for 1 or 2 games, or it's because somebody else's form has kept them out. So I think that spine, that kind of wall at the back, has been really, really important to us. Matt Walker, O'Connor player of the season, 7 out of 10 every week, and played right centre back, left centre back, always been good in each position. Yeah, he was a great signing this summer. He really was. Such a strong capture for us. And I thought Charles Vernon would be the signing of the summer. I think Charles has been a bit hit and miss. He's struggled to get in at times. I mean, he has really, like last month, I was looking at box entries per 90 and shots per 90. Now, Charles had only played 113 minutes. So to go on the table, I do a thing called February Roundup. If you haven't seen it on the website, have a quick look. I've got some stats at the bottom. I know some of you hate stats, some of it love it. But to qualify for the tables, you have to have played 200 minutes of football. And Charles had played 113 minutes, but he had more box entries and more shots per 90 minutes. So as an average in those 113 minutes than any other player. I think that he is, in terms of an attacking force, a good player. I just think his decision making probably lets him down a little bit. But we said the same thing about Cohen Bramall, and look at Cohen Bramall now. He's in the Championship. So yeah, there we go. Right, 40 minutes in, I am now heading back towards my house, walking into that warm sunshine. And just, you know, every time you look out the window, if you're working in an office, you look out the window, it looks like a beautiful day. You go out, it'll be chilly. Look out the window, see the sunshine. Know what's coming. Summer is coming. Warm days, lazing by a paddling pool if you've got one. We've got one for the dog. Beers, barbecue, friends. Some of us are getting married. A lot to look forward to. It's Lincoln City's immediate future, in my opinion. Yeah, it's chilly at the minute. We've come through the worst of it. We've come through the tail end of last season. And we're on the right track. Just have the faith. Keep the faith. Up the Imps.